Lena's fingers trembled as she adjusted the needle, her thoughts racing. The exarchal warrior lying on the table before her was a giant, tall, muscular, with sharp, angular features that could have made him look like a monster in another context. But there was no fear in his eyes, only desperation. His body was covered in deep gashes from the recent battle, his once vibrant skin now pale and mottled from blood loss. The alien's breathing was shallow, barely audible beneath the mechanical hum of the medbay. "You're sure this will work?" Lena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Her hands, steady as always in the field, now seemed inadequate for the task at hand. Her blood wasn't compatible with the exarchal. That much she knew. But they had no other options. She had to try. Korak, the warrior, didn't respond immediately. His consciousness seemed to flicker between worlds, as if the thin veil between life and death was drawing him into another realm. He opened his eyes for a brief moment, focusing on Lena. His voice was strained, gravelly from the pain, yet there was a strange gratitude in his gaze. "Do what you must. I am beyond saving," he rasped. Lena's heart clenched. He was a Kirkle, a proud warrior race, and their species did not show weakness. Yet here he was, defeated and in dire need of her help. She couldn't turn away. Not now. Not when his life depended on her. She connected the line from her IV to his and took a deep breath, preparing herself for what she was about to do. The moment the needle pierced her skin, a jolt of unease shot through her. She wasn't just offering blood. She was offering something more, something deeper, something sacred in their culture. If this worked, there would be consequences. As she watched her blood flow into his veins, she felt a strange pressure in her chest. It wasn't physical, not exactly. It was more like an overwhelming weight, a presence at the edges of her mind. She pulled back slightly, confused. Korak's eyes closed again, his body tensing briefly, as if he were fighting to stay conscious. Then, something shifted. She felt it before she saw it. An undeniable connection that spread between them, a thread binding their fates in a way Lena couldn't understand. Her mind flickered, and for a split second, she saw his memories. Fragments of his life, his victories, the bloodshed he had witnessed and caused. The pain of battle, the sacrifice of his people. Then it was gone. Lena staggered back, gasping for air. She swore she could feel his heartbeat in her chest, his breath in her lungs. Was this what the exarchal meant by a sacred bond? She didn't know, but there was no time to process it. Korak's condition had stabilized. His color began to return, the dangerous pallor fading from his skin. She leaned forward, studying his face. The warrior was still alive, and her blood had done what no other treatment could. He was saved. But the connection between them remained. As Lena's breath slowed, she realized something profound. She wasn't just the healer anymore. The exarchal had a different way of seeing things, a different understanding of power and sacrifice. And now, so did she. Lena stared at Korak as he slowly regained consciousness. The warrior's eyes flickered open, a faint glow in the depths of his pupils, an intensity that made Lena's skin prickle. He was stronger now, far from the lifeless shell he had been when she'd first started the transfusion. But there was something else, something unspoken between them, a strange weight in the air. Korak blinked, his gaze locking onto hers. "You saved me," he said, his voice low and gravelly but laced with an emotion Lena couldn't quite place. Gratitude, maybe, but there was something else, an ancient, solemn tone that sent a shiver down her spine. Lena opened her mouth to respond, but her words caught in her throat. The connection between them had intensified after the transfusion. She could feel his presence in her mind, almost like a phantom sensation. His thoughts were distant whispers in the back of her head, fleeting and fragmented, yet undeniable. It was as if a part of him had been grafted onto her very soul. "I do not know what you are," Korak continued, his voice filled with awe. "But your blood, it binds us now." Lena shook her head, trying to clear the fog that had settled over her mind. "This isn't possible. I'm just a medic. I shouldn't have. You should have, Korak interrupted, his eyes locking onto hers with unwavering certainty. In our culture, there is an ancient code of honor. If one saves the life of a circle warrior, the one who gives their blood is forever bound to the one saved. It is not a mere act of gratitude. It is a debt, a bond that cannot be broken. The weight of his words hit Lena like a wave. She had heard stories of the excircle customs, of their fierce honor and warrior traditions, but she never imagined it would apply to her. She was just a human. And yet, here she was, bound to an alien warrior in a way she could neither understand nor control. Lena shifted uncomfortably, rubbing her temple. What does this mean for me? What happens now? Korak didn't answer immediately. Instead, he studied her with an intensity that made Lena feel like she was being examined, tested. The silence stretched between them, heavy and thick. Then, finally, he spoke again, his voice low but firm. It means you are no longer just human. You have become something more, something that transcends the boundaries of our races. I owe you my life, Lena Carter, and I will repay you according to the ways of my people. You have only to name your wish. Lena recoiled slightly, taken aback by his statement. Repay me, she repeated, her voice rising slightly in disbelief. How could you? What could you possibly offer me that would make this worth it? Korak's lips twitched into something resembling a smile, though it was shadowed by a deep seriousness. Anything, Lena. The Exarchal are bound by their word. If you ask for my strength, it is yours. If you ask for knowledge, it will be given. Name it, and it shall be yours. Lena didn't know what to say. She wasn't used to this kind of offer, this kind of power. But she knew one thing for certain. Her life was no longer her own. She had crossed into a world she didn't understand, and she wasn't sure if she even wanted to. But curiosity gnawed at her. And in the silence that followed, something deep inside her shifted. She couldn't resist. I want to understand you, she said, her voice steady, but filled with an intensity she hadn't expected. I want to know what drives the Exarchal. I want to understand your strength, your honor, why you fight the way you do. Korak nodded solemnly. Done, he said, as if it were already a foregone conclusion. And then, before Lena could say another word, a strange heat washed over her, intense, electric, and invasive. The blood bond between them flared to life, and for a moment, she felt his thoughts and emotions as if they were her own. His memories flooded her mind. Visions of brutal battles, the weight of 1,000 lifetimes of warrior code. And at that moment, she knew her life would never be the same. The next morning, Lena woke with a headache, a deep, pulsing throb that seemed to come from the very core of her being. It wasn't just physical. It was something deeper, something tied to the strange bond she now shared with Korak. His presence was always there, a quiet whisper at the edge of her consciousness, as if he were watching her, feeling her every thought. She sat up in her cot, pressing her hands to her temples. The memories he had shared with her, visions of battle, loss, and survival, lingered in her mind like shadows. Lena had always thought of herself as someone capable of remaining calm in any situation, but now she felt something inside her stir that she didn't recognize, a primal urge to fight, to protect, to act. Lena, you are awake. Korak's voice cut through her thoughts. She turned to find him standing at the entrance of her quarters, his broad frame filling the doorway. His usual stoic expression softened slightly when their eyes met. Lena hesitated, her mouth dry as she searched for words. She wasn't sure how to explain what was happening to her. I don't know what's happening. It's like you're always here, with me. Korak nodded slowly, a glimmer of understanding in his gaze. The bond is becoming stronger. You will feel my presence as long as it exists. Lena swallowed hard, trying to keep the panic at bay. It was one thing to save someone's life. It was another to be connected to them in a way she didn't fully comprehend. And this connection was no small matter. There were moments when she could feel his emotions, his frustrations, his fierce desire to fight for his people, the seething rage he sometimes struggled to control. It wasn't just physical anymore. She was being pulled into his world, his fight. Korak stepped into the room, his boots making no sound on the cold floor. "There is no time to explain further. We are at war, Lena. My people are under attack." Lena blinked, her heart skipping a beat. "What do you mean?" "I thought. The Zykree are launching an attack on the Central Command. If we do not act immediately, they will overwhelm us." Korak interrupted, his voice low but filled with urgency. "We must fight. You must fight." Lena's breath caught in her throat. She had seen the Exarchal warriors fight before, unrelenting, brutal, and efficient. But she was a medic. She had never been in combat, never raised a weapon beyond the tools of her trade. She had no idea how to wield the kind of power Korak had. And yet, as he spoke, the weight of responsibility settled on her chest like a leaden stone. "You don't have to do this," Korak said, his tone softening slightly. "You could leave, return to your people. You are not bound by this fight." But the truth hung in the air between them, unspoken. Lena couldn't leave. Not now, not when she felt the bond pulling her in, not when she knew Korak's fate. And the fate of the Exarchal was now entwined with hers. "No," she said, her voice firmer than she felt. "I won't leave. I don't know how to fight like you do, but I can't just stand by while people die." Korak's gaze softened with a mixture of admiration and something else, something Lena couldn't quite identify. He seemed to see her, not as the medic she had once been, but as something more, something new. "Very well," Korak said, stepping closer. "Then you will learn." The next few hours passed in a blur. Korak led Lena through basic Exarchal combat techniques, how to hold a blade, how to anticipate an enemy's move, and how to strike with precision. Lena struggled at first, her movements awkward and hesitant, but something inside her began to shift. The blood bond between her and Korak wasn't just giving her strength, it was pushing her to her limits, forcing her to adapt. At times, she could almost feel Korak's thoughts in her mind, guiding her, sharpening her instincts. She could feel his anticipation when an enemy was near, his instincts as a warrior flowing into her own. The combat was brutal and intense, but with each swing of her weapon, Lena felt herself growing stronger. She was becoming something she had never imagined, something that was more than human. The bond was taking hold of her in ways she couldn't have predicted. As they finished their training session, Korak turned to her, his face unreadable. "You are ready." Lena nodded, her hands trembling slightly from the exertion. The fear was still there, gnawing at the edges of her consciousness. But there was something else now, a surge of power, of confidence that she had never felt before. It was like she had tapped into a reservoir of strength she didn't know existed. She wasn't just Lena Carter, the medic anymore. She was part of something much larger. And the war, whether she was ready or not, was calling her name. The next day, the Exarchal base was buzzing with activity. The war was growing closer, and every warrior was preparing for battle. But Lena, despite her training, felt out of place among the soldiers. Her body was still too human, her movements too unsure. But something had changed within her. The blood bond with Korak had unlocked something inside, something primal. It was as if every lesson, every motion, was written into her muscles, and with each attempt, she grew stronger, faster. As she adjusted her armor, a customized set to fit her smaller frame, Korak approached, his presence as commanding as ever. His usual warrior demeanor softened when his eyes met hers, a flicker of something unreadable passing between them. "You are ready," he said, his voice low but confident. "The time has come." Lena met his gaze, feeling the strange pull of the bond between them. The connection was undeniable. Whenever she thought of him, she could almost sense his emotions as if they were her own. It was no longer just an attachment of blood. It was a union, a force that wove their fates together. Ready for what? Lena asked, her voice steady, but she couldn't shake the sense of unease creeping in. To fight alongside us, Korak said, his eyes darkening slightly as he surveyed the horizon. The Zykree will strike soon, and we must stand together. But you are no longer just a medic. You are something else now. You've felt it, haven't you? Lena nodded slowly, her heart beating faster. She could feel it, the power that had been awakened in her veins, the speed, the strength, the sharper senses. The bond with Korak had not just enhanced her physical abilities, but had also connected her to his very essence. She could almost hear his thoughts in her mind, feel his battles, his struggles, his longing to protect his people. "I never asked for this," she whispered, the words slipping out before she could stop them. "I didn't want to become part of your world." Korak's gaze softened, a faint flicker of understanding crossing his features. He reached out, resting his hand lightly on her shoulder, a gesture that, though simple, held an immense weight of meaning. "You did not ask for this, Lena, but fate has brought us together. And now you fight for something greater than yourself. For all of us." Lena swallowed hard. She had always been a healer, a protector. Fighting wasn't her nature. But the bond, the connection to Korak, made her feel like she had no choice. She couldn't turn away from this, not when she felt his purpose intertwining with her own. As the Exarchol prepared for battle, Lena found herself walking among the warriors, her thoughts racing. She was no longer just an outsider, no longer simply a human. The blood bond had made her a part of their culture, part of their struggle. And she knew, deep down, that there was no going back. The Zykree would come, and Lena would stand with Korak, fighting by his side, bound by blood, bound by honor. The battle began hours later, as the first explosion rocked the ground beneath their feet. Lena's heart pounded in her chest, her senses heightened, and her body primed for action. She felt Korak's presence like a pulse in her mind, urging her forward, pushing her toward the fray. As they moved toward the front lines, Lena gripped her weapon tightly. She wasn't sure if it was her blood or Korak's training, but she could feel her body responding instinctively to the chaos around her. The Zykree were ruthless and relentless, but Lena's newfound abilities made her more than a mere human in their midst. The first Zykree warrior that charged at her fell before she even knew what had happened. Her reflexes, sharpened by the bond, had kicked in before her mind could process the attack. She looked down at the fallen enemy, her chest heaving, as she fought to calm the racing beat of her heart. She hadn't expected to feel this surge of power, this rush of primal instinct. Korak was beside her, moving with the deadly grace of a circle warrior, cutting through the enemy ranks with swift precision. But his eyes, as always, were on her, watching, guiding her with that silent connection. "You fight well," Korak said, his voice low but proud as he glanced at her from across the battlefield. His words carried a weight, a rare compliment from one of the Exarchol. But Lena wasn't sure whether the compliment was for her or for the bond that had made this possible. As the battle raged on, Lena felt the tide of war shifting inside her, her body and mind becoming more attuned to the Exarchol ways, to Korak's unrelenting drive for victory. But with every strike, every enemy that fell beneath her, a new question rose in her heart. How far would this bond take her? And at what cost? The battle raged for hours. The sounds of clashing weapons and the roar of battle filled the air, but Lena barely heard them. Her focus was sharp, the world around her narrowing to a single intense point: survival. Her senses, heightened by the bond with Korak, guided her every movement. Every enemy she faced seemed to move in slow motion as she anticipated their actions, her reflexes faster, her strikes deadlier. Lena wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. She was fighting for something far more complicated, the bond that connected her to Korak, to that Exarchol, to the war that was now hers as much as it was theirs. Each swing of her weapon, each blow she delivered, felt like a deeper entanglement in this shared destiny. She had killed her first Zykree warrior just moments ago, the shock of it still reverberating through her. The body of the alien soldier lay at her feet, and Lena couldn't help but feel a twinge of remorse. It was one thing to defend herself, to fight for survival. But something about the violence, about the bloodshed, felt different now. Korak was nearby, his form a blur of deadly precision as he dispatched enemies left and right. Despite the chaos, he seemed at ease, moving with a grace born of years of battle. His eyes flicked to Lena from time to time, offering silent encouragement or perhaps checking for signs of hesitation. But she couldn't afford to hesitate. The connection between them was too strong, too binding. She had to fight, not just for her own survival, but for him, for his people, and now for herself. "You are doing well." Korak's voice broke through her concentration. She could feel it in her mind, his words pulsing with pride and something else, something deeper. Lena glanced at him, her breath coming in short bursts. "I didn't ask for this," she said through gritted teeth, her heart still pounding from the fight. "You did not," Korak replied, his voice soft yet firm. "But you are here, Lena, and you are no longer simply human. You have the strength of the Exarchal in you now." The words hung heavy in the air. It was true. She wasn't just the medic anymore. She had become something else, something that straddled two worlds, two identities. And yet, with every victory, the cost of that transformation grew clearer. As the fight wore on, Lena felt herself slipping further into the abyss. Her strength was unlike anything she had ever experienced, but it came with a price. The bond between her and Korak was not just physical. It was mental, emotional, spiritual. She could feel his pain when he was injured, his rage when he lost one of his warriors. It was as if she had become a part of his very essence, a thread woven into the fabric of his soul. And every time she took another life, every time she fought alongside him, that thread tightened. The Zykree forces were retreating, their numbers thinning as the Exarchal warriors pressed forward. But Lena could feel the toll it was taking on her, on the bond she shared with Korak. She was exhausted, not just physically, but mentally. The weight of the violence, the bloodshed, and the connection to Korak was beginning to overwhelm her. As the last of the Zykree retreated, Lena collapsed to her knees, her weapons slipping from her grasp. She felt Korak's presence in her mind, felt his concern, his need to protect her. But there was something else, something darker stirring beneath the surface. She could feel it in her own body, a hunger, a craving for more. The battle had awakened something within her, something primal that she couldn't ignore. The blood bond had given her power, but at what cost? Korak knelt beside her, his gaze unreadable but full of intensity. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice low, his hand gently brushing her cheek in a rare moment of tenderness. Lena shook her head, but the exhaustion was written all over her face. She couldn't answer him with words, not when the weight of everything she had experienced was bearing down on her. The price of this power, of this bond, was becoming more apparent. She had crossed a line. She had become something other than human, and there was no going back. "No," she said softly, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm fine. Just tired." Korak's eyes searched hers, and for a moment, it felt like he could see straight through her, straight into her very soul. "You are strong, Lena. Stronger than you know. But be careful. The bond we share is not without its cost. You must learn to control it, or it will control you." The warning echoed in Lena's mind as she tried to steady her breath. She had saved Korak, and in doing so, had forged a bond that went beyond anything she could have anticipated. But now, the true challenge was beginning. Learning to control the power that coursed through her veins, and learning to live with the consequences of her choices. As the battlefield fell silent, and the Exarchal celebrated their victory, Lena knew one thing for sure. This war was far from over, and the real battle, within herself, was just beginning. The days after the battle were a blur. Lena had been in combat for the first time, and despite the victory, She couldn't shake the unsettling feeling in the pit of her stomach. The blood bond with Korak pulsed through her like a constant undercurrent, a reminder of the strange connection that had irrevocably changed her life. She felt more powerful than ever, her body quickening with the heightened senses, her strength growing by the day. But with that power came an intensity she hadn't expected, a desire to fight, to destroy, to protect, almost an overwhelming craving to be part of something greater than herself. And Korak, always Korak. She could feel him beside her even when he wasn't physically there. His presence lingered at the edges of her thoughts, like a shadow following her wherever she went. Lena stood outside the Exarchal base, looking out over the distant landscape. The horizon was painted with the dull colors of twilight, the sky heavy with the promise of another day of war. Despite the peace that came with victory, Lena felt restless. The battle had only scratched the surface of what was happening inside her. It wasn't just the memory she had inherited from Korak. No, it was more than that. The bond was seeping into her soul, changing the way she saw the world, the way she reacted to threats, to enemies. She was becoming something else entirely. "You are troubled." Lena stiffened at the sound of Korak's voice. He appeared beside her, as silent and imposing as ever, his dark eyes fixed on the horizon. She didn't need to look at him to know that he was aware of her inner turmoil. The bond made it impossible to hide anything from him. Her thoughts, her fears, her desires. He knew it all. "I'm not sure how to deal with this," Lena said, her voice tinged with frustration. "This hunger I feel. After the battle, after everything that's happened, I can't turn it off. I can't stop feeling like I want more. More strength, more power. I don't know who I am anymore." Korak's gaze softened, though his expression remained stoic. "The bond is strong, Lena. It changes you, yes, but you must not let it control you. You are still yourself, still human. The exarchal blood that flows within you does not define you. You must define yourself." Lena closed her eyes, trying to calm the whirlwind inside her. His words resonated with her, but the truth was, she wasn't sure who she was anymore. The battle had left a scar on her. Something inside her had shifted. And it wasn't just the physical strength or the battle instincts. It was a darker, more dangerous part of herself that was awakening. She could feel the violence in her, a raw, primal need that sometimes threatened to consume her. "I don't know how," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Korak's presence enveloped her, the bond connecting them so deeply that it almost felt as if they were one entity. His hand reached out, placing itself gently on her shoulder. She could feel his warmth through the thin fabric of her tunic, but it was more than that. His emotions, his concern, his quiet understanding of her struggle. She knew, in that moment, that he was doing everything he could to help her navigate this. "You will learn," Korak said, his voice deep and soothing. "The power you feel, the strength surging through your veins, it is not something to be feared. It is something to be mastered. The exarchal do not give up. We do not surrender to the darkness within us, but we learn to control it, to use it when necessary." Lena turned to him, searching his face for any hint of doubt, but all she saw was a firm conviction, a belief that she could overcome whatever was threatening to overwhelm her. It was in his eyes, the same resolve that had carried him through countless battles, through the brutal hardships of war. He had faced the darkness before, and somehow he had come out stronger. "How?" she asked, her voice raw. "How do I stop myself from being consumed by it?" Korak's grip tightened on her shoulder, grounding her. "You must accept it. Embrace it, but never let it rule you. Only then will you be free." Lena stared at him, her thoughts swirling. Accept the darkness. Embrace it. It sounded so simple, yet so impossible. She didn't want to become a monster. She didn't want to lose herself in the violence, in the bloodshed. But the temptation to tap into the raw power within her was growing stronger every day, pulling at her, beckoning her to step further into the world of war and destruction. "Will you help me?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. Korak nodded slowly, his gaze steady and unyielding. I will help you, Lina. I will guide you, as you have guided me. For a moment, the world around them seemed to fade into the background. The bond between them pulsed, like a living thing, a tether between two souls. And in that moment, Lina understood. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but with Korak by her side, with the strength of that exarchal blood flowing through her, she could face whatever came next. The real battle was just beginning, and it would be one fought not on the battlefield, but within her own soul. The days that followed were filled with silence, the weight of the bond pressing heavily on Lina's chest. She trained harder, pushing herself further each day. Korak's guidance was unwavering, his presence constant as they worked together, refining her combat skills, her understanding of the exarchal ways. But beneath the surface, something darker stirred inside her. The violence that had been awakened in her never truly receded. Every battle, every skirmish against the Zykri, seemed to fuel it. She had thought that the desire for power would diminish, but instead, it grew stronger, more insistent. Each victory in battle, each life taken, felt like a surge of energy, a rush that she couldn't ignore. The bond with Korak, the strength it gave her, the connection to his emotions and instincts, was both a blessing and a curse. There were times, during the quiet moments between battles, when Lina would find herself staring into the distance, lost in her thoughts. She would wonder if the blood she had given to Korak had truly changed her, or if she had always carried this darkness inside her, buried deep. She had always been a healer, a protector, someone who saved lives. But now she felt the pull of something far more dangerous. And the worst part was, it felt good. Korak seemed to notice the change in her, but he didn't speak of it directly. Instead, he watched her, always there, offering quiet support. His presence was a constant comfort and a reminder of the responsibility they both carried. But even he, with all his years of experience, couldn't fully understand the burden of this bond. He had never been human, never had to wrestle with the duality of this war, the fight for survival and the war within herself. One evening, after a particularly grueling training session, Korak found Lina standing alone at the edge of the camp. The sky was dark, stars scattered across the heavens like diamonds. The air was cool, the only sound the whisper of wind through the trees. Lina, he called softly, stepping closer. His deep voice, though calm, carried the weight of an unspoken question. She turned to him, her gaze meeting his. There was a hardness in her eyes now, something that hadn't been there before. I'm not sure if I can do this anymore, she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm losing control. Every time I fight, every time I kill, it feels like I'm becoming something I don't want to be. Korak's gaze softened. He stepped closer, his hand resting lightly on her arm. The connection between them flared, the bond pulsing in her chest. She could feel his concern, but there was something else there too. An understanding, an acceptance. You are not losing control, Lina, Korak said, his voice low but steady. The power within you is not something to fear. It is a part of you now. You must learn to embrace it, but more importantly, you must learn to channel it. The bond is not about becoming someone else. It is about becoming more than you were before. Lina closed her eyes, taking in his words. She had heard them before. She had felt the truth in them. But now, standing on the precipice of something far greater than herself, she was scared. She wasn't sure she could control the darkness inside her. What if it consumed her, turned her into something she couldn't return from? Korak's hand moved from her arm to her shoulder, a silent reassurance. You are not alone, Lina. I am with you. And you will not lose yourself. Not while I stand by your side. His words settled over her like a blanket, but they didn't completely silence the doubts gnawing at her. She was becoming something more, something beyond human, beyond anything she had ever imagined. But would that something be enough to save them all? Would the power she now wielded be the very thing that destroyed her? Before she could answer, the shrill sound of alarms cut through the night, breaking the fragile moment. Lena's heart jolted into her throat, adrenaline flooding her system. Korek's eyes hardened immediately, the warrior in him rising to the surface. "It's them," he said, his voice fierce with purpose. "Zycri forces are approaching." Lena nodded, her heart pounding as the familiar rush of adrenaline surged through her veins. She wasn't sure she was ready to face the Zycri again, but she didn't have a choice. The war was here, and she had to fight. Korek's gaze never left her, his expression unwavering. "You are ready. Trust in yourself, Lena." Lena swallowed the fear rising in her chest. For the first time since she had joined the Exarchal, she understood what he meant. The battle wasn't just against the Zycri, it was against the darkness inside her. And if she could master that, if she could control the power that surged within her veins, then maybe, just maybe, she could win this war. But it wasn't just the Zycri she had to defeat. It was herself. The battlefield was nothing like Lena had ever experienced before. The chaos, the sound of war, it felt different now, more immediate. Her senses were sharper than ever, every movement around her amplified in her mind. The Zycri were relentless, as always, but this time, Lena wasn't just fighting for survival. She was fighting for control, for her very soul. Korak was at her side, his presence a constant force of strength. His movements were swift and sure, his sword cutting through enemies with the precision of a predator. Lena moved beside him, her every strike powered by the bond that had altered her being. Yet, with every swing, every life she took, the hunger within her intensified. She could feel the power rising, urging her to unleash it, to let it consume her completely. But she had promised herself she wouldn't let it take over. She wouldn't let it define her. "Stay focused." Korek's voice broke through her thoughts, his eyes locking onto hers. It was a silent command, a reassurance, but there was an edge to it. He was fighting beside her, but he also knew that the true test wasn't the Zycri. It was the battle within her. Lena nodded, her breath steadying, as she gripped her weapon tighter. She had trained for this moment, had prepared herself for the inevitable confrontation, but there was something about facing the Zycri now that made her feel almost invincible. The bond made her stronger, faster, more deadly. But she wasn't sure if it was enough to save her from herself. The fight raged on, the Zycri pressing forward with a relentless fury, determined to break the Exarchal forces. Lena felt her pulse quicken as they pushed through the enemy ranks. Every Zycri warrior she struck down seemed to feed the darkness within her, pushing her further to the edge. It was hard to tell where the battle ended and where her own mind began. In the midst of the carnage, Lena saw him, the leader of the Zycri forces, towering and menacing, his red eyes glowing with hatred. A primal rage surged within her. She could feel the power building inside her, the need to end it all, to destroy him with the same fury that had consumed so many before her. But then she remembered Korek's words, "Do not let it control you." Lena's body moved before her mind could catch up. She was already charging toward the Zycri leader, her weapon raised, ready to strike. The bond with Korek flared in her chest, as if warning her, urging her to stop. But she didn't. With a guttural roar, she clashed with the Zycri leader, their weapons locking in a fierce struggle. Lena felt the weight of the power coursing through her muscles straining with the force of the blow. Her vision blurred for a moment as the bond pulsed stronger, her connection to Korek amplifying her every movement. The rage was intoxicating, but so was the power. "You are nothing," the Zycri leader snarled, trying to overpower her. But Lena's grip tightened. She could feel the darkness threatening to take hold, but she fought it, pushing it back with everything she had. The rage, the hunger, it was all still there, but she refused to let it win. She wasn't a monster, not like this. With one final, brutal strike, she drove her weapon into the Zycri leader's chest. His body crumpled to the ground, lifeless. Lena stood over him, chest heaving, her weapon slick with alien blood. She didn't feel the victory she thought she would. Instead, All she felt was the emptiness of it, like a part of her was still lost, still teetering on the edge of something she couldn't control. She heard Korik's voice behind her, softer now, more urgent. "Lena, it's over. You've won." Lena looked up, the weight of the battle still heavy in her chest. The Zykree forces were retreating, their leader fallen, their morale shattered. The Exarchal had won, but it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like a war that was far from over. She turned to face Korik, her breath catching in her throat. He was standing there, watching her, his expression unreadable. She could feel his concern, the weight of his understanding. And yet there was something else, something deeper in his gaze. "Lena," he said softly, crossing the battlefield to stand beside her. "You did not lose yourself. I know it was hard. I know the darkness inside you was strong, but you fought it, and you won." She met his gaze, her heart racing. "I'm not sure I did." Korik stepped closer, his hand resting on her shoulder. "You are still you. The exarchal power that flows through you does not define who you are. You define yourself, Lena." For a moment, she stood there, his words sinking deep into her heart. She had fought the battle within herself, and though she hadn't won every fight, she had taken the first step. And that, she realized, was enough. The war wasn't over, not for the exarchal, and not for her, but she had found the strength to fight on. Not as a monster, not as a weapon, but as herself.